I'm going to help you take some of the steps you're going to need to get that professional look without breaking the bank. Okay, so let's start off with this. Let's talk about cameras. So choosing the right camera is not as important as you think, but it is important, of course. Now, if you're looking at working with a budget, maybe you're trying to stay budget friendly, you can actually get cameras at a pretty inexpensive price and still get a pretty good picture. Like, for instance, the Sony ZV-E10 or the Canon EOS M50. Those are both 4K capable cameras, and they're really budget price. In fact, if you buy one used, you could probably get one for about $400 or $500. There's lots of used sites you can get these cameras at. If you get them brand new, it just isn't really that much more to get the brand new one. I bought a Sony ZV-E10 for about $600 a couple of times, and they're really good cameras. They have 4K, they have autofocus, they have on-screen menus to help you make sure that the right pieces of the frame are there. There's capabilities to change over to manual settings. I mean, it's a great camera for beginners, especially using that autofocus. And then if you get the right lens with it, you can really create a nice looking picture. So if you're tight on a budget, you can start there. In another video, I'll kind of go through some of the different camera choices out there based on your budget, how you can step up your game in terms of the cameras. But I want to tell you, that's not the most critical part of your journey. Cameras do have an importance, but it's when you get down to it, as long as you're dealing with the more reputable names, you're going to get a pretty decent quality across the board. Now, my experience is more with Sony, with Canon, as well as Blackmagic, and they do a great job too. So if you're dealing with, like I said, Nikon or some of the other brands out there, Red, there's lots of other cameras out there you can get, and they do make good quality units. Now, let's talk about sharpness. Now, let's say you've got the camera. Now we want to make sure that you got that sharpness, and you also want to have what's called that depth of field. So like right now, you see I'm very sharp in the image, but then behind me, everything else is quite blurry. If I had something right here in front of me, it would be blurry too. So that's a look that you're probably looking for, and that's what you're seeing in a lot of those videos. Now, in order to get there, you're going to need to have the right lens. Now, I'm going to recommend that if you can, if you have the funds, to go ahead and step up to a prime lens. Now, a lot of times when you buy a camera, it comes with what's called a kit lens. So when you buy that camera that comes with the lens, I thought, oh, wow, this is great. Wow, this particular camera comes with the lens. I thought this is going to be amazing. I'm going to get this sharp picture, and I was sorely disappointed because a lot of times those kit lenses don't come with the right kind of specs you're really going to need to have a sharp picture. Now, for example, one of the things I found is that the faster lenses are the ones that are going to be more capable of giving you that sharp image that you're looking for. So when you're looking for a lens and you look at the kit lenses, a lot of those kit lenses, they may have an f-stop rating of around 3.5, 5, 6, which is not necessarily that good for what we're talking about. When you get a prime lens, you're going to get more in the area of 2, 1.8, 1.4, 1.2. These are numbers that you're going to want to hit when it comes to prime lenses to get that really sharp image, especially in situations like this. I'm working with a 23 millimeter Viltrox autofocus lens. It has a 1.4 f-stop on it. So I've got it fully open and it creates a great image. And so you want to look at something that has that lower f-stop rating. So when you're looking and searching for lenses, look for that. Look for 2.0 is probably the max you want to go, and you want to go down below that. You could probably get away with 2.8. That's actually pretty good too. But if you really want to get a sharper image, try and go lower than that. That's going to help give you not only a sharp image for your subject, which in this case is probably you if you're going to be filming yourself, or it's going to give you that blurred background, or both. So that's where I think the prime lens is, because they're not that expensive. And you could typically pick up a prime lens for anywhere from around $100, $150, especially if you're talking used. You could pick up a 50 millimeter 1.8 lens very inexpensively, maybe $150. If you want to get something like a wide angle, like a Sigma 16 millimeter lens, it's a beautiful lens, very sharp. it actually has a wide angle so that you can catch a lot of things in the screen. That's going to probably run you closer to $400. But again, it just really depends on your budget. Now this Viltrox I'm using right now, like the Sigma, has the autofocus, has a very sharp image, looks great, and it also has other features such as the autofocus. Well, I think I mentioned that already. It has the 1.4 f-stop, so it's a really fast lens. It really opens up wide. The f-stop, what that does, that just tells you how wide you can open up that lens to bring in light. And the more light it's able to bring in, the better your image is going to be, as long as it's not too much light, because that's also another, you don't want to have too much light, you're going to have a blown out image. So just keep that in mind. Look for lenses that have the lower f-stop. And then now let's move over to the camera again. With the camera, you're going to want to make sure that that camera is set to 4K resolution if possible. This is going to make it better for you so that when you record in 4K and it compresses it down to that 1080p or that full HD, you're going to have a really great image, even a better image than if you originally recorded at 1080p. So, and I know I'm using some jargon here, but typically it's going to be on your camera. It's going to give you choices between 4K, it's going to have 1080p, 1080p, and then it's going to ask you, do you want to record at 24 or 30 frames per second? So there's a decision there. It really kind of gets down to what kind of look that you want. Do you want to create a look that's more cinematic? Maybe it's a little bit darker. It's just kind of more of a feel of a movie. Then you want to go more towards 24. If you want to kind of make it look more surgical and bright and more like a TV show or a news broadcast, that kind of look, then you're going to want to go more towards 30 frames per second. Also, if you're talking about sports, things like that, you're going to want to have 30 frames per second. But a lot of people who are going to be watching this, you're probably watching this in order to make sure that you're being recorded. And so if you're recording yourself, I'm going to suggest that you most likely look at 30 frames per second. Most social media is based off of 30 frames per second. That's probably what I would go with if I'm in your shoes. But of course, you can go at 20 frames per second, not a problem. Now, when you have the settings at 24 frames per second, you want to make sure that your other settings match it, such as the shutter speed. Now, some cameras will actually adjust this setting for you. Typically, kind of a rule of thumb, you don't have to go by this exactly, okay? You can do variations of this, whatever looks good in the camera. But you can go double the frame rate on your shutter speed. So if I'm working with a 30 frames per second on my camera, then I'm gonna go double the frame rate, or 60, or my 1 out of 60 on my shutter speed. That allows me to have a nice, smooth motion in picture. It's gonna look more natural. Now, if possible, what I wanna do, if I can, is I want to use as low of f-stop number as possible on that particular lens. So if I bought a 1.4 lens, then I want to make sure, if I can, I want to be able to fully open it up to 1.4. I'm going to be able to fully capitalize on how beautiful that lens actually is. Now, in some cases, I have used 2 and as high as 2.8 on a 1.4 lens because I had too much light coming in anyway and it just wasn't going to look good. So definitely go by what looks good on the camera. So these settings all kind of work together. Another thing you're going to want to watch out for is your ISO. The ISO determines how much light is coming into the camera. Now in your manual or your documentation that come with that camera, it'll tell you what the native ISO of that camera is. Basically, it's kind of like a default setting for that camera. Try and stay within that native ISO. Some of your higher end cameras have what's called dual native ISO, so you actually have 2 settings instead of 1. If it has 2 settings, if you're looking to do something inside, then you're probably going to want to use, of those 2 settings, you might want to use the higher one. But if you have plenty of light coming in, then you're probably going to want to use the lower one. So it really just depends on the situation that you have at the time. But the ISO, if you have it at the right setting, it's going to really bring out your colors. It's going to really bring out you as the subject or whoever you're recording. And it's not going to have what's called noise. Noise is when, if you ever seen those pictures where it was a little bit too dark and you had a little bit of graininess there. It just looks a little pixelated, and you could tell it's not a smooth color. That's called noise. So you can minimize noise by having the ISO at a good setting. Now, some of these cameras, like the ones I mentioned earlier, they have auto settings. So what you can do is put it on auto and leave it there. One of the things I will suggest about auto, though, when you're using auto, is that if you're going to be sitting in front of the camera like I am, it's better for you to find the settings that work best for that camera and for you, and leave them on manual, because what's going to happen is if there's a sudden movement or anything happens that's out of the ordinary, you don't want that auto whatever setting to change the settings while you're recording and while you're filming. I've had situations where, let's say I'm filming and it starts getting dark outside, or maybe it's early in the morning, it's starting to get light outside. That can affect how it's recording, because with the auto settings, what it's going to do is it's going to possibly adjust to that, which could be a good thing. But in other cases, it may not be a good thing. I may not want it to adjust because I may have everything set like I want to. And so in that case, you may want to make sure that you learn the right settings for that camera and then switch over to manual to help keep your image quality consistent. Okay, so let's talk about lighting. Now, for professional results, it's so important. It's very important to have lighting. Now, one of the things you can do at the very beginning, if you're really limited on budget, is you can just simply film in front of a window. So when you have natural light coming in, use that as your light source, more so than an artificial light. So as long as you're filming in the daytime, that works. Another thing you want to do whenever you're filming this way, if you can, take one of your lamps inside your home and get you a daylight bulb. So it's easy to find. You go to any hardware store or Walmart or Target or wherever it is, and you go to the light section. Instead of getting the soft lights, you want to get the daylight ones. Take that daylight one and plug that into that lamp that you have. Have that light up your background. It'll really give a nice pop to your videos. Another thing you can do is have that light focus on the back of your head. It'll help bring out your hair. It'll help just really give you a nice little highlight. Now, in this particular setup that I have right now, I really didn't go all out on my lighting like I would on a professional setting. I really just have two lights. I have one light here and I have one light there. Very simple setup. They're LED lights, very inexpensive lights. I think I bought a pair of these for like 150 bucks. So very inexpensive. The lights I use now are more expensive, but they also are a lot brighter. They have more flexibility. They're more heavy duty. They're really designed for professional work. If you want to invest a little bit more in lighting, I would suggest that. But lighting is very important. You want to make sure you have the lighting on the front of your subject. You don't have to have it on both sides. If you want to have it on both sides, you can. Sometimes if you're doing content that is kind of really emotional or somber or things where it's kind of serious, then you may just want to have lighting on one side and have a little darkness on the other side of the face. It just kind of helps to give it that kind of feel or effect. If you're trying to share a positive message, a bright message, then you may want to have more brightness in the picture. So in this case, like I have a bright message, so I'm sharing things with both my lights on and I'm fully lit up. So just think about that in relation to your content, how you do your lighting, how you want it to look. And as I mentioned before, it's good to sometimes have lighting on your background. Now, sometimes what I'll do in my background is I will set it up where I'll take some color and I'll put the splashes of color. And so this light right here, it can produce millions of colors because the settings in here, you have all these different settings on this particular RGB light, and it really brings out some nice colors. So I can have it where on the back of me, I can have it where it lights up my background and really makes it look nice. See, you notice that? I bring it down, it goes back like it is. I bring it up, I bring the lights. In fact, let me just hit the little off button here. You see the difference? So think about that. You could do some things like that to give a little flair to your videos. So now that we talked about lighting, let's move on to sound. Sound is so important. I will venture to say that it is probably more than 50% important, It's even more important than video when it comes to content that people are going to listen to for a long period of time. There's a lot of people who will endure a little bit of bad video, but they don't want to endure bad sound. So make sure that you have great sound on each of your videos. Now, there's lots of different options you can have. I'm going to go over a couple of the more popular options. One of the popular options is going to be a stationary mic like what I have here. You can have a shotgun mic, or you can have just a regular mic like the one I have here. The regular mics you do need to be closer to. So if you'll notice, when I pull my mouth away, testing 1, 2, see it's not as clear, whereas if I get real clear, it's really good. So that's kind of the difference between a regular mic and a shotgun mic. A shotgun mic can be a little bit of a distance away and still sound pretty good. In a lot of cases, a shotgun mic will be attached to the camera, or you can have them on a boom like this. So if you're going to have a home setup, you may want to set yourself up where you have a mic stand that will hold that mic and have it in just the right spot for you each time you go to do your filming. Now you can get one of the podcast type microphones like a Shure, or you can get perhaps like a wireless setup, which I like to use. You can use, of course, the shotgun I've talked about earlier. The shotgun mic that I like the most, I use a Sennheiser MKE 600. It's a wonderful microphone, but there's other microphones you can get that are less expensive and some that are more expensive, depending on what your needs are. But I will tell you that if you invest in a microphone, it will definitely step up your game. Now, one of my favorite wireless microphones is the Hollyland, but of course there's DJI, there is Rode, there's tons of other brands that I can't even sit here and name all the brands that are out there. Just look at the ratings, make sure they have decent ratings, and generally you can't go wrong on most of those external microphones that are lavalier based. Now, the reason why I'm talking about external microphones is because the microphones that come in your camera, they generally aren't that good. They're good at catching the ambiance of the room, but that's about it. You're going to get lots of echo in there. You're going to get lots of extra sound. I mean, you're going to be hearing the air conditioner. It's just all kind of things you're going to hear. It's just not designed to give you the high quality sound that you're looking for. So when you're getting a camera, don't rely on the internal microphone that's in the camera. Look at microphone options. If you want to go really inexpensive, what you can do is buy a lavalier microphone that will plug directly into your camera, as long as your camera has a mic input, which most cameras do, and plug it in there, and you can buy one of those lavalier microphones for about $20. So it's not a big investment. That $20 is going to step up your game multiple times when it comes to doing content, especially if your content is for any length of time, where you're going to subject your person who's watching this to listen to it, even a minute. Okay, even a minute, you want to have good sound. So make sure that you're able to invest a little bit of time and money in having great sound using external microphones. At the very least, to get a lavalier microphone that's a wired mic, and you just plug it right into your camera. Lots of options out there. You can jump on Amazon or B&H or any of these companies and look up lavalier wired microphones. I prefer the wireless because it gives me more freedom with my subject who I'm recording, or even myself. Or if I'm not using a wireless microphone, I'll use a microphone like this one. What's good about having any of these microphones I'm mentioning is that whenever you finish recording, your sound is already lined up with the video. So you don't want to have that extra step. Some videographers I've worked with in the past, some filmmakers, they want to have the recording of the audio separate. Now that is great to have, because those recorders do a very, very good job in recording the sound. You can a lot of times manipulate the sound quite a bit. You can change it up, make it better, improve it, and that sort of thing. Another thing about external recorders, in fact, I have two that I use on occasion, is that particular one is non-clippable. So if you have a sudden loud noise, it's not going to throw off my sound of my microphone. So those are just some of the advantages of having those external recorders. You have something that's not tied to your recording. You can always line it up in post. In fact, the latest editing software now, I use Adobe Premiere Pro. Once I plug in that recording and I plug in my video, as long as I have the internal microphone on the camera going on my main video, it can sync up automatically with my recorder. So it works out pretty well. It's not too bad of a step, but if you're new to this and you're just getting into it, I would just suggest options that work real time where you don't have to line up the audio with the video. But either way, you're definitely going to want to have external microphones. There is no comparison between using a microphone that's internal to the camera versus using an external microphone. Now, there's a video I did not too long ago. I go into the different types of audio and I actually demonstrate what the different types of audio sound like so you can make your own judge as to which audio you feel is best for your purposes. Now, let's talk about the last step. That's composition and framing. So I'm not going to go into deep photography type theory here. I just want to go over some basics with you to keep a professional look. There's one of the things you're going to want to learn when it comes to framing, and that's the rule of thirds. So just think of dividing the screen in thirds. So you have a third, and then the other third. When you are filming, the way our eyes are used to looking at the screen, we look at the screen in thirds. So you want to make sure that you or your subject is somewhere around that middle third. Now you might, let's say the third line is here. Perhaps my eye could be here, and maybe I could be as far as here, but I don't want to be way over here, okay? And then with this other line here, if I want to go this side, I might want to go about this far. Another thing you want to think about whenever you're doing your framing, at least what I like to do, is I like to have it where the framing is, let's say I'm on this side of the screen, I want to have my subject looking this way. If I'm on this side of the screen, I'm going to have my subject looking this way. That way you don't have a situation where, let's say the subject is on this side and you have it looking this way, you have all the space behind them. It can be distracting. It's not a rule. You may decide to do it a different way. This is just the way I usually like to do it. You want to leave just enough headroom above their head without making the frame look too empty. Now, in my standpoint, when you're looking at my frame right now, I do have quite a bit more space than I normally would have. The reason why I have that space there is so that you can see the signs right here. Oops, I did it wrong. So you can see the signs right here. It's a little bit above my head, and I didn't feel like moving things too much. So typically, I would say in most cases, it would be more like this. So I have a little bit of headroom above my head, not too much. Right now, I probably have more than I would normally have when I'm on set with a client. And then remember how I talked about earlier, how you want to light up the background? One of the mistakes I used to make pretty early on is I put my subject too far against a wall, or I would be too far against a wall. You want to make sure you add depth to your frame. So make sure that you're not up against a wall, that you've got plenty of depth behind you to show more depth of field. It just adds more variety and a fullness to your shot. Another thing you can do to kind of make it look a little bit better is to have other elements that are not too distracting that are in the shot. So in my case, I like to have a few things. These are sayings that you could probably still read. If you want to go alone, you can go fast, but if you want to go far, you go together. Well, the main 4 words in here is go alone, go together. You can see that pretty easily. But anyway, I like to have the saying there. I like the color that comes from the signs I have right here. And then also here, I've got a gimbal, which represents what I do. So those are some of the elements that I have. So think about what elements you would like to have in the frame, how you would like that to look. Now on YouTube and using platforms like this, you'll see a lot of people who do these videos will be somewhere in the middle of the frame like I am right now. So I didn't choose to go to one side. I could have done it and it would have looked fine to you. Possibly wouldn't even noticed that I moved to the side. That's because we're following the rule of thirds. So just keep that in mind. You want to have some decorative elements there. You want to have something that kind of offset your face, show more variety, but you don't want it to be too cluttered or too busy either. So you want to be careful with that. Okay, you made it this far, so you've learned a lot about how you can get a more professional setup. I've got lots of other videos you can watch to help you with other things. Let's just recap the key points of this particular video. Number 1 was choose the right camera. Make sure you're able to get a camera that works for you within your budget. That's important. Also, make sure that you get a good lens. Now, you don't have to go out there and get the next latest and greatest zoom lens. That's a $1,000 lens. You can go out there and get a $100, $200, $300 lens. Usually if you're buying used, you can get it more closer to $100, $150 for a fast lens that's a prime lens, on up to much higher. Now you can spend much more than that for a lens, but just to get you started, you're going to get a great image if you spend anywhere between $100 to $400, depending on if you're buying used or new. And then I want to encourage you to practice with your equipment. So when you're going out for an outing with you and your family, take your camera with you. Just take some test shots. Get used to it. And that way you can learn more about your camera, and you will get better naturally in using that camera as you take it out and use it more and more. It'll help you learn different settings about the camera you didn't realize. Maybe you're watching YouTube videos about that particular camera and you want to learn that new feature. Well, this will give you an opportunity to do that. Now, if this guide has helped you, I want you to please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, share with someone else who'd like to step up their video camera game. Now, after watching this video, you may have more questions. I would love to hear more of those questions. If you could, put those questions in the comment section. I will be reading those and I will be answering those as they come in. Let me know what you like to see in the next video. I really appreciate you watching. Thanks for being a part of our journey, and I hope to see you in the next video.